if we weren't such a sick nation, we would realize that this would be another step towards our evolution.
Amen, brother. I mean, if you figure this thing exposes your weaknesses, optimizes performance if you're an athlete. We talk about movement equating to brain function. Movement's a vitamin. It's a nutrient for the brain. Welcome back. We're with Ron Lemire today, founder and CEO of Liquid Trainer, the FLO dynamic movement system. And wait do you see it? It's really, really cool. Also, structural movement expert, mobility and wellness coach for over 48 years. Ron, thank you so much for coming on. And I got to tell you, looking at some of the exercises, they're totally cool because we incorporate a lot, but that dynamic movement is everything. Can you share, like before we got started, share your story and background, how you got, how you arrived at this? I mean, your passion in life.
My passion, I didn't discover till I came to Boulder, Colorado. But before that, I graduated at Maine Maritime Academy as a marine engineer, and I shipped out a few years, in the industry. And then I had like a 6-month leave, and I came out to Boulder. So I got a chance to taste the cornucopia that was here. And the cornucopia that I was really interested in was structural mechanics. I fell into teachers. In fact, my first teacher was a guy named Dr. Timothy Binder, who taught a thing called position technique. He's a chiropractor, acupuncturist, homeopath, naturopath. And I apprenticed with him for 4 years. I was really into structure. I was really into understanding suspension mechanics. Kind of went really well when I was, in those days, we were studying, Don Juan and everything, and, Carlos Castaneda, and they had a chapter in there, the power of the gait, and how you can run almost not leaving any footprints. And you think, well, that's just fiction. The more that you start understanding about the subtle nature of the spine, which you know quite well, beyond 3D lies a lot of possibilities. And as I started working with suspension mechanics, and I started also learning homeopathy, herbalism, all kinds of things that Boulder was offering. It was a renaissance here in that time in the early 70s. And eventually it led me to work with John Denver. And I had a friend who came to my therapies, and I got to help him with his back problems. And one day he asked me to come to Aspen, that he had a friend he wanted me to work on. And I said, okay, sure. I wanted to go to Aspen. And I called my friend. I said, well, who am I working on? And he says, oh, my friend, John Denver. I said, really? John Denver? Well, how cool is that? So I all of a sudden I had to shift my thinking, because I had never really worked on a celebrity like that. And so at the time, nobody was doing body work anywhere. I was the first therapist in Aspen to do it. It was pretty strong in Boulder, with Rolfing and Feldenkrais. We had cross-pollinations of every kind of therapies. And so we got to talking about this and that and diet. And I said, as long as you're on the road, you're never going to get good food. You're going to get highly salted food from any fancy restaurant. I learned macrobiotics from Michio and Kushi and Aveline, and learn how to really balance foods through yin and yang, 5 elements and stuff. And I cooked for a lot of sick people, and I saw how whole foods, natural foods, can bring people back quite fast. So I told that to John, and then before we were done, he offered me this job to come on as head of security, because he also knew I was a pugilist. I used to be I used to fight Golden Gloves, and I studied martial arts and a lot of stuff. So he says, I have an opening. You could come on, and you could come on not only as my personal security and head of security, you could come on as my cook and my therapist. And I said, okay, sure. And 3 or 4 years down the road, one of my students in position technique from my Hoshino therapy days working in a clinic there, an arthritis clinic in Miami, came up with this, brought this tool. It was like a bag of water. It was like, had a couple, 2-3 pounds in it. And he gave me a whole bunch of them. He says, you know, Ron, he says, when you taught us position technique, it was a real good way of, you know, level 1, level 2, and how to work with the body and how to educate the body so that, you know, you can walk straight and do all of these different exercises to kind of balance both sides of the brain. It's not something you just throw in there. Like in yoga, you can jump in, but after a while, it's going to take you a long while to figure out really what are these particular asanas and what do they have to do with the organ structure, what do they have to do with the wind as far as the ballast of the lungs, etc. It takes you years to learn that. So I had already taught position technique to our guild in Miami, the Hoshino Therapy Clan. And then I started playing with this bag of water, and I learned a few movements, you know, and Victor was living like just a few miles away. So I had learned how to move it, 5 or 6 movements. And then I went on a road with it. I taught it how to do it, how John taught John how to do it, and I taught some of the band members how to do it. And that's what we did. We did a lot of liquid training. And then it was called flow motion.
And so you blended that to that flow dynamic system.
Yeah, that whole system really came from a lot of these confluences of martial arts. And I also, I worked with dancers. When I was in the Aspen, I was teaching everybody I could. I worked in the Aspen Club and in the Snowman's Club. And at that time, it was a haven for tennis players, and it was a haven for golfers. So I got a chance to get into the understanding of both of these sports. And I started, because it's water, if you looked at the movements, those are just basics. So when you buy this thing and when you start working with it, you're going to work with 8 movements. And the 8 movements have been really developed like over a 30-year period, literally 30 years, to say these are the primary movements that are actually at the root of martial arts, at the root of dance, at the root of all movements. It doesn't, because every time you teach it, if you're teaching someone that has a professional understanding of their art, they'll say, oh, that's just like this, or that movement is just like this. It's kind of interesting because, you know, I started back in a day of lifting weights, and, you know, at the time we had programs of gain a pound a day for 14 days, and we'd eat protein powder and we do weights at calisthenics. And all of it was linear, if you think about it. You know, you're just going to go along the fulcrum of your limbs, and you're going to develop the belly of the muscle. You don't really pay too much attention to the tendons, ligaments, and connections. But the belly of the muscle was important. You know, along came Arnold Schwarzenegger, and he pumped himself up quite a bit, and he became a kind of a module, or the way that men started shaping themselves. So we're watching Pumping Iron, and so Arnold's psyching his guys out, saying, one day you too will be like me, you know. And so they were just pumping up, and you could see his biceps were out here, his forearms were out here. Then they took a coffee break. And I was watching, because I'm looking at mechanics at the time. I'm not looking at the body as like, this is strong or weak. I'm looking at mechanics, how's it functioning? So he goes to get a cup of coffee and fills it up, brings it up to here, and goes to here. That's all he could do. The forearm and the bicep. Then he had to go like that. I said, oh my God, you just lost 30% of your movements.
Yeah, I tell, there's a balance between strength and flexibility. Super flexible, not as strong. You got to have that balance, honest to goodness.
Yeah. And I was at the time deeply involved in anatomy, physiology. You know, I downloaded my marine engineering stuff into the human body. Anything that's ever out here is actually in here first. You know, no matter, even computers, it doesn't matter. We are walking of everything that's out there. We're the gods of the material world.
You listed it as the most advanced athletic trainer and motor sensory awareness in existence. I work with so many neurologic damage patients, and you're talking like brain fog to Parkinson's. Okay, and I love the way that this actually works. Can you elaborate on it? Because sensory motor, like your body's awareness, proprioception, is the
Mhm.
key to developing healthy brain function.
It is. I'm going to be a little out there on left field here and say a couple things that I've observed and studied over the years is that 92% of the world's population is right-handed, which means that our dominant side is right-handed. Another thing is our Earth rotates counterclockwise. Counterclockwise, if you look at it, if you throw a ball, for example, and you kind of go like this, you're actually doing a counterclockwise motion, which is a right-handed movement. The lefties have a real hard time because everything is designed for right-handed people. So I'm kind of looking at, okay, water, 70%, we're made of that, but we're doing linear stuff. We're pumping ourselves, and as we do that, we're limiting function. So anyhow, I'll fast forward. When I left the road with John, we were still I was still teaching the movements with osteopaths, chiropractors, and all of my, alternative healers. And we're working with this, and even a lot of PTs as well. PTs love stuff like this because they're gadget junkies, And so PTs, OTs, they all like this. And so what I want to get about talking about dominant side, my daughter Lelia was in a Waldorf curriculum, and she was around, I think she was in high school, just started high school, freshman year. So I then got a bunch of bags from the company that I was in. We had started and stuff, And she approached me, says, "Can you teach some of my friends at the Waldorf school?" And I said, "Sure." So I showed up and I had about 12 kids, anywhere from the 7th, 8th, and 9th grade. And they were just like entering puberty and all of that. And so I started, teaching them. But I noticed two boys that, well, you've seen so many people yourself, John. When you get to young kids, their bones grow faster than their muscles sometimes, and they're kind of slunched over. Now it's even worse because they're on computers and cell phones, so the structural part is really taking a big toll right now. But anyhow, these kids were like collapsed. That's what we would call a collapsed structure when their alignment is not there. When they're too far forward of center line, it's a collapsed structure. Now they say as we get older, you're going to get into what you call somatic retraction as the body comes forward. But that's just something they made up because they don't know anything else.
It's true.
And so therefore, let's all follow that path of collapsing as we get into our 50s and 60s or whatever. Anyhow, I just noticed that. It was just something to see. And I started teaching them. And when you teach kids, they're movement junkies. You got to keep them right on, one after another. More the older people, or I should say people in the competition fields, you want to slow down to the point where they understand the movements so they can then simulate what their favorite movement is with the bag, and they can replicate it to both sides of the body. So anyhow, I taught all these movements for about a month and a half, and I was running out of movements. They were so quick to learn everything, and they wanted more and more and more. So then, unfortunately, Christmas came along, and I had 2 weeks off, and they said, so I gave them a task. I said, "All right, you got 2 weeks. I want you to go over the movements, and then, but more than anything, I want you to come back, and I want you to try show me some movements that I've never seen before." It was the smartest thing I've ever done with this project. Anyhow,
you got young, creative, with a variety of activities. They're going to be in a whole bunch of different sports. Yeah, brilliant.
So
you got your R&D group.
It might be. That is exactly it. So, and even to this day, if I want to learn new movements, I don't learn it from anyone but that group between 8 and 12 years old.
Very cool.
Why? Because their frontal lobe or their frontal lobe has not been developed. So the idea of limitation has not even entered their minds. So I came back and I noticed these two kids, the boys, where all of a sudden their structure was not here, but all of a sudden it was here. I'm going, whoa. Did you guys get Rolf while I was gone or while we were away? Now, what do you mean, Rolf? What is that? I said, well, did you go see anybody to help you with your bodies, your body work or anything like that? They said, no. I said, well, what did you do over the vacation? Well, we spent hours every day doing these movements, and we've got at least a half a dozen movements that we know you have never seen before. That part was irrelevant. I left and I said, my God, I have worked on a lot of kids. I've worked on, literally thousands of people at that point, and I have never seen such a change from a collapsed structure to an exact erect structure within 2 weeks. So I said, wow, what is this? I mean, this kind of blew me away. That says, wow, this is a side effect. Because whatever movement you have to do to one side, you have to do to the other. And so what I started learning and unraveling is that as long as we're dominant sided, we're always going to favor the one side. And then as we get into our 40s, I don't know if you noticed this in your practice, but in my practice, that's when I see most problems, because that dominant side has become so fixed and strong that accidents begin to occur, subluxations begin to occur, and that's when body work in chiropractics and osteopathics, all of those things are really necessary for the fourth decade.
I love the way you put the biofeedback, because it is. I mean, you do one movement, you're stretching the flexors. Okay, then you do another movement, you're stretching the extensors, and you have that little assist of that water bag. I mean, it's brilliant. Now,
Yeah.
People master 100 sports performances, and I know you're describing different movements and stuff. When they're doing certain movements on a sport, like tennis, they're always one-sided, but with your flow system, that biofeedback, okay, describe how that changes that, because if they're doing tennis, they're doing a one-sided sport.
Right. When you're doing tennis, and I kind of worked with a lot of pros in Aspen. I worked on this guy named Lee Herzog. He was on the road, and when I'd work on him as a massage therapist in the Aspen Club, I noticed that his lats on the dominant side, the serving side, was like so developed, and I thought, wow, his left side seems almost atrophied compared to the right. I'm going, Lee, what are you doing here? What are you doing to compensate for your movement? He says, well, I'm weightlifting, or I'm doing this. He said, not much, I'm on a court all the time. I said, really? I said, well, I got to teach you this system. So at that time, I went into the Aspen Club with this tool the same time that Pilates showed up. Now, Pilates had a whole room full of machines, and they were doing all circular movements again, because again, the guy Pilates worked basically with dancers, and dancing is probably the only modality that truly is circular. And when you get into any sports, whether it's football, whether it's baseball, anything, you're going to find that the circular movement is the dominant movement. How you twist your body, the kind of torque you twist your body with, whatever angle you put that twist in. It could be like in golf, it has like 2 or 3 angles, right? From a short iron to from a 1 wood to a 9 iron. You have quite a different range there, and they're all different, but still it's the same torque. And what happens, like if you look at golf and you see the pros, right, like Arnold Palmer, and all these big names, they've had shoulder replacement, hip replacement, knee replacements. Tiger Woods had a knee replacement. You look at it, well, why? They're not doing anything to compensate. So when you teach a golfer an exact golf swing with the liquid trainer, you're not only teaching it the dominant side, but you're then taking the receptive side and educating it to become dominant the opposite way. And then you can see your line where the water's flowing. You can see the line, and you're doing the exact perfect golf swing. The consequence of that is that you're unwinding the tension that's created by the torque of the dominant side. And every golfer I've ever worked with improves their game, literally improves their game within 2 weeks. And their handicaps come down within a month. And it's sort of like, what tool does that? I've never seen anything, but that's just working in one plane of motion. When I worked with dancers, I really had an interesting experience with a gal named Jennifer Paulson. She was the choreographer for Liza Minnelli. And so she showed up at a hotel, and I went into one of the rooms with her, and I taught her the basic 8 movements of which she learned in 10 minutes. Almost everything I showed her was like,
wow, cool.
like that. Why? Kinesthetic awareness. The development of kinesthesia, which is basically inner motion, the understanding where you are. You're looking at how you move from within, but the movement is more like like a dance or running or anything like that. That's kinesthetics is the key, KI, energy of motion. Proprioception is basically a Polaroid shot of what you're looking at on the inside. When you need both of them to develop your sense of awareness. So anyhow, I went to level 2 where I started. Level 1 is all stationary movements, and it's to understand ground reaction force. Now, ground reaction force is something I learned from a gal named Judith Austin, who worked with Ida Rolf. And it's called she did a thing called Aston patterning. And her whole thing was ground reaction force. And I really picked up on that. Now, ground reaction force, if you're going to go and you're going to learn something like Qigong, Qigong is the most advanced martial arts. Well, how did you say that? All you do is standing still and you're breathing and, Well, the secret is this. If you're doing karate, you're doing what you call it's a development for young kids, puberty martial arts. And basically you want to bust somebody, you want to break bones, and you want to go like that. And your chi, which is basically your collection, your reservoir of energy, is dispersed. It's always going out here because your movements are out here. And so you telegraph to the world, hey, I can fight. Why don't you come and challenge me? And so in the martial arts world, karate is, basically a lot of contact. And then the first level of the middle of that is Aikido, where Aikido now decides, well, hey, let's do circular motion and let's not be offensive about it. Let's just kind of take the energy and start manipulating it. And we start then developing and cultivating a chi where the reservoir starts to fill a little more and starts to stay there. And as it does that, your message to the outer world is, I don't need any conflict. And then when you get towards Tai Chi, and they might say that's an old person's martial arts, but it isn't. If you meet a Tai Chi master, they're absolutely dangerous if you try to hurt them. It's amazing how the more internal you go, the stronger you become. And when you do Qigong, you're totally internal, you're breathing, all your systems are starting to kind of awaken, your reservoir is filling, and you can sense danger from the outer world a long time before it arrives. So in a sense of, I would say the most advanced martial art is you're less likely to have conflict when you practice these internal systems. Now, I look at the liquid trainer as that. And the second level, so these are all stationary movements. So if you're going to learn Tai Chi, Qigong or Tai Chi, the teacher will say, okay, now I want you to just relax your knees, allow your knees to bend forward and sit into your posture. And I want you to think from the center of the earth as if you're pulling up the center. Now, this has been taught for thousands of years. It's the same way of saying, imagine the root. And it's called rooting. You imagine that you're at the center of the earth and you're pulling up. Now, ground reaction force is, here's the simple way of hacking into that right away. when you're standing, or if you're pushing away, if you push to your right foot, your movement will shift to your left. If you push to your left foot, your movement will shift to your right. You have an equal and opposite reaction. So as you know about the brain, this is now you're working directly with the cerebellum, and you're working with the internal system of how you're engaging these movements, and they come from the ground up. So if you start understand ground reaction force, and you start to work with gravity, it doesn't really hurt you. It doesn't do like what we've always learned gravity to do, is like it ages us. What it does is it replenishes our energy. It pushes back through us. And so in the second movement system, level 2, we have steps from one side to the next. So every one complete movement is from whatever I initiate from the dominant side to the receptive, and then from the receptive side back to the dominant. That's a movement. The movement at first can be a half circle, could be a whole circle, and that's just one plane. Then we can add all the other planes by doing it in a horizontal plane or the transverse plane, or, the frontal plane, transverse plane, and all of these different planes of motion can start intersecting, where literally your core becomes the center of a sphere, and you're delineating through the bag all these different circles that are around you, and you're the center at all times. In the first lesson, what the hardest part is to get people to decondition themselves from their dominant side, so that their dominant side can educate their receptive side to become as dominant, and the dominant side to become as receptive. So now you have an equal flow back and forth from a stationary point of view. Now, if you take the next level, we're going to take steps, the bag's going to go and all of a sudden we're doing these kind of movements, and then we do spinning movements. And so anyhow, I taught the scalp Paula, the second level, of which she learned in 20 minutes.
Wow.
These are advanced movements. And my most advanced movement, which was the 3 rings, and I never been able to teach that in less than 2 or 3 lessons, She learned it right away like that. And then she says, hey, I'd like you to come by to my studio. I was in New York City at the time. She said, I'd like you to teach my students. So I showed up the next day with about 20 bags, and we filled them up. We got everybody suited up, I'd like to get the right size handle so that you can do loops, and, it coordinates with your movement a lot better when you have the right size. And that way you're not hitting the ground either, because one of the things you got to understand, this is a very refined plastic, but it doesn't work against, hard objects. If you go in a hotel and you got these stalactite ceilings and you rub that bag against that ceiling, you're going to have it leak. So you got to be really careful about how you use it. So we teach these basic things, and the right size is really important. So I showed up, and then I started, and again, the same thing. These dancers, man, I don't know, they just learned such great things that I had them all doing like level 1 and level 2 within 45 minutes.
Wow.
And then I was at the place of, I couldn't teach them more than I felt that they should need to learn at this point. And then they said, okay, well, let's do some movements. So they started doing steps, and they started intersecting one another, and they started going into choreography. And all of a sudden I was their student, because I never factored in timing with other people. Steps, counting, like music, 1, 2, 3, 4. It was like all of a sudden I was this kid, I was lost. I'm going, wait a minute, I'm supposed to be the teacher here.
Very cool. Hey, tell us about your certification program. How can people become trainers?
Well, the program that we have is that when people learn the basic movement, and you can see it. You can clearly see when someone demonstrates ground reaction force through level 1, for example, the stationary movements. So I would say, well, good, teach that, but I want to certify you until you feel really comfortable with level 2 movements. Level 2 movements are when you start doing steps, you start counting, you start spinning around, and you always know where you are, and your movements become more trajectory with movement with your feet, like you're not just stationary, you're moving. You can do any kind of steps, 360-degree ways, you can spin. And when you can do that, you're actually entering the next level, which would be improvisation. And when you get into improvisation, if you get to improvisation, which is really not that hard, but when you get to improvisation, you'll never let this tool go because there's nothing that can do this. What happens in improvisation? Improvisation is a level of learning how to take several different movements and combine them as one continuous flow. And you can take these movements and put them in different patterns, and it works great for dancers. It works great for martial arts. It works great for any discipline, literally. And the thing about when you get into improvisation is that you now enter an area of discovery or exploration and discovery. And, I'm 73 now. I've been doing this I've been teaching this for 39 years. And honest, John, every time I pick up the bag, I'm still looking to see if I can come up with a new movement. And just last week, I came up with a new movement. I went, wow, this is so cool. This is going to be this will go here, or this will go there. This will help that modality, and you can see, because when you're working with raw water and you're working with circular motion, it's not linear. You're no longer in that, it's not about how you're going to pump up your pectoralis majors or your biceps or, the calf. It's not that. It's the way to develop that reservoir of energy that is what we keep tapping into for longevity or balance or, where everything comes from.
Ron, this is brilliant, man. Where can our audience get a hold of you, follow you, and do you have any special offers? Because it's dynamic. It really is.
Well, I think you do, right?
Well, I know there's going to be a special offer at the bottom of this. Okay.
Yeah. And so there's that. You can order it, and what happens, you'll buy it for the given price, and then when you get it, you can go into the website, and it allows you to go into level 1, level 2 movements, and there's plenty of other workouts that are in there, and you can learn it all literally from the website. And I have taught it so much that every time that when we did these videos, it was as if I was teaching a class. So you can go to front flow and stay there till you get it. And then after that, go to second flow, which is back flow, and then you go to rotation. And so anyhow, that would be learning the basic movements. And you could do it by yourself, or if you're in an area where there are some of my teachers, you could learn it from them. It's not that difficult to learn, but there is a deconditioning process. Like I said, if you have trouble with the movement, work at it. Come back to it. Reset your brain. Come back to it. Oh, wow! All of a sudden, I have it. What was even the resistance to begin with? And so you go to liquidtrainer.com, www.liquidtrainer.com, and the information should be there on how to access it. And then to buy it, you can get a discount through the code that you'll be giving. That has to do with the people who are listening to this now. So let me go back a little. I worked with John Denver for a number of years, and then somehow I really got involved with this liquid trainer thing. I got more deeply involved since I developed this understanding of what I saw with these kids. And another thing, when I started teaching kids, I'd have classes with kids. They truly are the funnest thing to work with for me. The parents would come back to me and say, my kid's attention span has changed. His grades now are a lot better. He does his homework without hardly any resistance. She said, what is this thing? This is like a mind-body tool, and it doesn't matter who you are. You could be the best. I could work with Tiger Woods, and I could improve his game. there's absolutely no way I could not improve this game. Simply because this is a rhythmic pattern system that once you set it into motion, your body will adapt to the balance. Now, think about what I said earlier, that we are 90% right-handed. So, and now we have a tilt in our axis where our world turns counterclockwise, and subtly or not so subtly, we also have a tilt in our alignment. We're leaning towards the dominant side. But if we start to break that open a little, where we invite both sides of the hemispheres to work equally, the first thing that people notice is that when they walk, they feel more aware. They feel lighter on their feet. And so what happens is the spine starts to lengthen, and just because of circular motion. And when the spine starts to lengthen, there's a sense of kind of a waking awareness that goes along with this. And you know, I know yoga. So back in the 60s, when we were all right-handed dominant weightlifters, and, you know, fitness, that kind of stuff, the onslaught of the East that came to meet the West, we started meditating also. We started doing yoga. We started doing martial arts. All of these are left and right hemispheric balancing modalities. What makes this tool to be complementary to all of those. And I don't want to say, well, this is the only system you need. I'll just say, do this, but do it with all the other stuff you like to do. You know, complement it, throw it in there. But this will bring balance to even to yoga. If I do this, and I do it often, when I do this 10 minutes before I do yoga, my asanas are like right there, right on. It's almost I don't need to warm up. And I feel a lot more awake in doing it. So I have to say that I'm pretty grateful for, at my age, I'm 73 now, and I don't really have any knee problems, ankle problems. I don't, my wrists are fine. My neck has never had problems. I don't have any problems with my spine. And I'm a big fan of chiropractors. I'm a big fan of anybody that helps subluxations to become clear so that spine can have its energy to work with. If we weren't such a sick nation, we would realize that this would be another step towards our evolution.
Amen, brother. I mean, if you figure this thing exposes your weaknesses, optimizes performance if you're an athlete. We talk about movement equating to brain function. Movement's a vitamin. It's a nutrient for the brain. And this is, I think it's a fantastic product. Ron, this is excellent. With all our audience that's going to see this, they're going to see a link down below. Buddy, I can't thank you enough for coming on. This is going to be fantastic. God bless you, man, for blending every discipline in this unit. Okay, man. Thanks so much for coming on, and I mean, this is a really cool product. I'm going to be ordering it because I want to experiment around. Okay,
you're not going to be ordering it.
Yep.
I'm sending it to you. How tall are you?
Thanks, brother. 5'11".
Okay.
Okay, man. Well, Ron, buddy, thank you so much. God bless you, man. Thanks for making a difference, and I'll see you later.
Oh, thank you for making a difference. I enjoy what your messaging is.
See you, brother.
Take care.